welcome once again to the Mark Osler Retirement Experience. My name is Randy Cook, and each week Mark and I sit down here and talk about you and your money, you and your 401k, you and Social Security, you and your retirement. And we talk about getting you more, the pathway to more. I had a dog one time, and we brand new puppy, and we had to figure out what the dog's name was going to be. So the dog did this whole thing, went over to the dish and plopped the dish right in front of me like he was Oliver from the show. So I named him Oliver because he wanted more. So,
that's good.
There's your intro for today, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm great, Randy. How about you?
I'm good. We're coming up on Halloween. And actually, this is crazy. I'm driving down the street and I saw a car dealership and they had their Christmas lights up. And I'm like, come on, guys. It's October, for crying out loud. It's not even Halloween yet. But the Halloween decorations are all over the place. Are they popping up in your neighborhood?
Oh, yeah. So I actually was over at my buddy's house. I never get to do this. You know, we actually went to downtown Cary for a minute. We went to DeFara Pizza because, they use the Brooklyn water for the pizza. It's unbelievable.
Nice.
And they use, the buffalo mozzarella, and then the tomato sauce itself is fresh from, comes over from Italy, from that little village. It's just fantastic stuff. Okay.
Wow.
So, I probably sold you on that alone.
Yeah,
but yeah, my buddy, he had lights up. I'm looking, I'm like, he's not lighting up for Christmas, right? No, they were Halloween lights.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is interesting. But then, you also brought up the dog thing. I just thought about, Randy, to be honest with you, I'm not the big dog person in the house. It's my family. Okay. So our first dog, they said, well, you can have the dog, but I get to name it. Okay. I was born in Philadelphia. I was raised in South Jersey. So we got a white yellow lab, and we named her Jersey Girl.
Okay.
And that was fantastic. And then, sadly, we had to put her down like 5 years ago. And then we got a little dog, a Morkie, and wasn't thrilled about that. But I like the movie Interstellar, so I named the dog Murphy, the girl Murphy.
Yeah, I remember that show.
Yeah, it was good stuff. So, truthfully, here we are on Halloween coming up, and I still have two young kids.
Yeah.
So I got to take them trick or treating, and that's one of the things we look forward to. And it's on Friday, so we can chill a little bit.
As a parent, you're trying to figure out what your kid wants to be for Halloween because you want to get that outfit for them. The problem is 3 months before they change their mind, and then 2 months before they change their mind, and pretty soon they're watching a cartoon 2 weeks before Halloween, say, I want to be that. It's like, too late, kid. Amazon ain't going to get here with that one. But anyway, well, it's not as easy in retirement as just walking from house to house and picking up your retirement money like it is picking up candy at Halloween. But that's what we do here is talk about retirement and try to help out. Mark is a financial advisor, helps out people build retirement plans. And that's what we talk about here on the show. And when it comes to your retirement, there are a lot of opinions out there on how much money you need, because that's the big question that everybody talks about. And you see these huge numbers. You need 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, $2 million, $3 million to retire. And you and I have talked about this in the past. Those numbers are for maybe somebody else. They may not be for you. But Motley Fool did an interesting article and says, when you see one of those articles, think about this. Number one, where do you live? Is it a high-cost area? Is it a low-cost area? Is your house paid off? How will you live in retirement? Are you a big traveler? Are you going to spend a lot of money? Or are you going to be kind of modest with your spending? What do you usually spend per month? And what are you going to get from Social Security? Once you answer all those questions, you're going to get a bead on really how much you need for your retirement. So, Mark, tell me, do you like the list? And are there other things that you would add to that list that would give us a good view on how much we need to retire?
I actually think this is a really good list. I mean, you look at, do you live in a high or low cost area? Well, that's a big one. Now, granted, I live in an area in Cary, North Carolina, where it wasn't that expensive to live here 20 years ago, but then Forbes listed it as the number one place to live in America about 20 years ago. And when that happened, yeah, it's more expensive to live here now. Things have changed. And with the massive inflation we've received, I mean, things have adjusted. And so that could have an effect as well. Now, granted, looking at some outlying areas in this area, I'm in Wake County. If you look towards Chatham County and some other areas, you might be able to find some land, some things, and things might be a little cheaper. And then guess what? When you go out on the outskirts, the gas can be a little cheaper too. And so I would agree with that. I would say that really does matter, and building that into the plan and understanding expenses, it makes a big difference. Having the house paid off, that could be, a plus for some folks that are just trying to manage what they need on a monthly basis. Now, is it a necessity? No. I have some clients that they sell their house and then they rent in retirement. And I get it. They just build it into the budget, right? And then I have clients that maybe we shouldn't pay off the mortgage. We got a mortgage that's 2.6%, 2.75, whatever it might be. But the point is, should we pay off the mortgage? Well, it just depends. It depends on your situation and if it makes the most financial sense for you, right? Everybody's situation is different. And then we were talking about how modestly do you want to live in retirement? Well, I have a client. She became a client a couple of years ago, and she had a high-paying job, and she wanted to know, is it possible, can I retire at 60 or 61? Do I have to wait to 65? We're looking at this as a whole, and just as a whole, just understanding the fact that when she got laid off, what do we do about that? Well, we made some looks into her financial situation, kind of forward-looking, and that's just where we're at. Essentially, is we're just trying to make good looks into your future to make sure that, hey, if you want to retire at 60, or what if I get laid off? Is it possible? And so what I'll say is everybody's situation is different, and this client encountered some things, and those are the things that we're looking at right now.
For somebody like that who is 60 or 61 years old, the whole healthcare thing just really kind of overshadows everything, because if you go onto Cobra, you know how much that costs. And if you want to go out to the marketplace and get your own policy for healthcare, those aren't cheap. And some of those premiums are probably going to go up next year. So, I mean, when you retire early, you get laid off and you try to figure out if you can do it, healthcare is probably one of the main things that you want to know about.
It is. And you also want to know, can I build an income plan into the situation that could really help in a situation like this? Or I've built all these assets up. Do I need to work on the thing we talked about, preservation, right? So, Randy, the one thing we were discussing, and we talk about this each and every week, is our acronym PIG, preservation, income, and growth. We want to stick to that. So, if you have built up all these assets, are you getting to that point in your life where you want to preserve what you worked your whole life for, and then build in some income plans for the future so that you feel like you could retire if something came up that changed your situation maybe a little earlier than you expected? So yes, we were talking about IRMA because that has an effect on Social Security and Medicare, and how is that going to affect you? So the question is, when do we turn on Social Security? When do we do these things? So how modestly do you want to live in retirement? It all depends on what has been built into your plan. And then what do you usually spend? That's a loaded question, because it actually becomes very different. Sometimes people spend more in retirement. Sometimes they make more in retirement. We want to do what you want to do in retirement. If you want to retire in your 50s or 60s, you're probably going to want to do some traveling and some things, because when you get in your upper 70s and your 80s, you're probably not going to want to do those same things. So build these things into your plan and look at this. And then what will you get from Social Security? We just brought that up. Well, are you going to turn on Social Security at 62, 65, 67, 70 years old? I usually kind of push back on people about 70. I'm not saying I tell them not to do it. We just have a conversation, because what if you died at 71 years old?
Yeah.
They're not going to give you the backlog for what you missed out on.
It's a good list. And I think that sitting down and having the conversation about what your situation is, when can you retire? And many of you might be running up against this right now. There might be some early retirement options for you at your employer. And then you kind of wonder, could I do that? Some of my friends are doing that. Well, there's one way to find out. Let's do the math on your retirement. Give Mark a call and let's go through the process here and have a no cost, no obligation meeting. We'll just start crunching numbers for you and give you a real good idea. And maybe the answer is maybe not now, but how about next year instead of 5 years from now? Maybe that's the meeting that would be really great for you. Here's our website. Here's our number to start that conversation. Moretoretire.com. moretoretire.com. There's a place down at the bottom of the website there where you can put some information in and the team will call you. Or you can call us. It's 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. Well, we see all these headlines about, the biggest fear of retirement is, I don't want to run out of money. You know what number two is now? Number two is inflation. Everybody's worried about the price of things, and you don't have to go too much further than the meat counter at the grocery store to find that out. And now with some tariffs, that's causing some things too. My wife is a big coffee drinker, and coffee has gone up immeasurably. So there's a lot going on there. But when we figure out inflation for your retirement, what does that mean? Because what you spend might be different from what everybody else spends. So I found some things here that affect retirees. Eating out is up about 5%. Travel costs are up 8%. Nursing home costs are up 9%. Home health care is up 10%. And Medicare Part B premiums next year are going to go up 11%. So much for 2% inflation. So when you figure this out, Mark, in a retirement plan, you want to give people a kind of a raise every year to kind of offset this inflation. How do you figure out your inflation number for people?
We want to start with an income that either is plenty of income above your expenses or an income that's going to be a little bit above your expenses with inflationary protection, right? Because you have to have one or the other. Otherwise, you're going to plan to fail. Right? And you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. So you want to set up a plan that's going to be successful for you. So you just brought up coffee, okay? Randy, I've got 4 daughters, 24, 20, 12, and 8, okay? All across that range. And a lot of times when I get little gifts, I'll buy Starbucks gift cards and stuff like that because when they order coffee, they don't order coffee like I do, okay? They get these crazy pink drinks and all this other stuff, and I'm like, that'll be $35
for coffee. What?
What is going on? I'm gonna have to pull out of your accounts for this one. Right?
I feel
so,
you.
We got coffee.
Yeah.
How does your wife order coffee?
Well, let me see. It's 2 shots of the sweetener, and she's, oh my gosh, it's iced coffee with 2 shots of this and a couple of shots of that and whipped cream on top. It's like going and having a milkshake, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
Yeah. Well, the first time I ever had iced coffee, I literally threw it down the drain. I said, I can't do this. I just can't do this. It changed everything. So I drink it black, and occasionally I'll throw like a stevia in there or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe a little cinnamon, but ultimately I'm a basic guy when it comes to coffee. And so I don't mind spending a little bit, and I'll make it at the office. You know, I can just make it at the office and be just as happy as anything, right? Because, ultimately we want to lower the cost here.
Yeah, exactly. And lower the cost in retirement. So when we talk about the inflation idea there, and that needs to be built into your plan, is you wouldn't want to go for 20 years in your job without a raise. Do you want to go 20 years in retirement without a raise? Probably not, because we all see how prices just go up naturally. I mean, I know that we went up 9% on inflation. We went, holy smokes, everything was crazy. Then it came back down to 3%, and we still see prices that are up there. It's not like companies, the company that makes laundry detergent, it went up to $10 a bottle, and now it went down to 5. Now they settled in there around 8, and it's still up, higher than what it usually is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got a client right now. He's 71 years old, and his income is vastly above his expenses, and we're just looking at his plan to see what makes the most sense here. Or should we do the increasing income with inflationary protection that might cost them a little bit more for a deposit, or should we just do the flat income? And in his case, it's possible financially it might work out better for the flat income because his expenses are so much above. But, that's just something he's going to have to determine for himself. With regards to what's needed, yeah, inflationary protection is extremely important, but we can pull it from several sources, Randy. So sure, we can do a lifetime income rider from an annuity. We could do one with increasing income, but we could also add in some market stuff there too. Like I said, I'm one of only 300 advisors in the country that works with Market Guard. We have some proprietary stuff, and then we also use structured notes. And structured notes could be an alternative investment that maybe breaks up correlation, which is just things moving in the same direction in a portfolio. But what it also could do is it could also be an income note. So you can get income off of it that could certainly be maybe a little bit more attractive than the annuity. And so these are the things that we discuss and talk about. But absolutely, if we're not planning for inflation, if we're not planning for taxes, then we're planning to fail. So we want to make sure that you have the right income, but we also want to see you have growth as well. And sometimes you have to build in some preservation there too. So like I said, preservation, income, and growth, they're paramount.
Well, one of the things that we want to make sure that as you go through your retirement, you don't find yourself 5 years from now going, hey, the $6,000 a month that I thought it was going to work out, now I need $7,000, and you never planned for that. So that's the conversation. If you don't know what to ask when you sit down with a financial advisor like Mark, it's how much am I going to get paid and where's my raise coming from? It's kind of the same thing when you sit down with your employer when you're interviewing for a job. This is going to be your job, 20, 25 years of retirement. So let's make sure you're getting paid. Give the team a call and Mark will sit down with you. Let's do that. No obligation, no cost look at where you are right now planning for retirement. Here's the number. Here's the website, moretoretire.com. Just check that out. Learn more about Mark and the team. And then down at the bottom of the page is a place for you to put some information in there. That'll give us what we need to give you a call, start the conversation. 984-300-1984 is the number. 984-300-1984. All right. If you're 50 years old or older and you got a 401k, you can pack more money in there than people who are younger. As a matter of fact, the number that is the catch-up, the extra money, is $11,250. That can make a difference in retirement. Well, Secure Act 2.0, Secure Act 1.0, these have been changes to retirement planning. This is something that's kicking in next year. If you make more than $145,000, your catch-up has to go now into a Roth, not into your regular 401k. And if you don't have a Roth, you can lose the catch-up provision, the ability to save that amount of money. So, Mark, that's really important to have that catch-up, especially, when people get into their 50s and they start getting their kids out of the house and they pay for the weddings. They go, now it's my turn. Now I've really got to focus on my retirement. So they really do take advantage of that. If they lose this, it's not a good day, is it?
It's not. And I'll be honest, if you have this problem, there's always something to talk about here. Mm-hmm. One of the things I want to discuss right now is an alternative to a Roth IRA.
Okay.
You've got the opportunity for life insurance, mm-hmm. Okay? And folks are like, life insurance, what are you talking about? Well, it's really easy. Let me just give you a Reader's Digest version. Basically, all you're doing is overfunding a permanent whole life or universal life or index universal life policy.
Okay.
Not variable, because I don't want to go that route, okay? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by overfunding? Well, for example, let's just say you've got a policy and you realize, oh, you know what? I can afford to put $20,000 a year to this policy. You're not spending that money. You're dumping it in a bucket. Well, what you have to make sure is that the insurance premium is below what they call a modified endowment contract limit. If you stay below the modified endowment contract limit, then what will happen is the IRS will allow you at some point to take tax-free loans from the policy in the future. That's based on the Internal Revenue Code. Now, I'm not giving you tax advice here. I'm just telling you that this is a look at an alternative to a Roth IRA. Mm-hmm. Why? Because there's actually no limit to how much you can put into these policies. So if you make a lot of income and you don't even qualify to do a Roth IRA and you don't have a Roth 401k at your job, and there's actually a lot of clients of mine that come to me and look at this opportunity for kids, and grandkids, because this is something you could do as a benefit for them. Because what happens is when the money goes in, yeah, there's insurance costs and things like that, but because you're overfunding the policy, the money can grow. And when the money can grow, it can hold up the policy. And if, let's just say you take income in the future and you pull from this thing, there's a death benefit as well. So as long as you haven't exhausted the death benefit, you've got that. And that's why I like to mess around and call it a Roth IRA on steroids. It's a great opportunity for folks. Now, if you don't have that Roth provision, then come talk to me about getting some market exposure too, because we got some proprietary stuff in-house that we can talk about with you that I think would be really impressive to add to your portfolio. And you know what? If you don't want to contribute more than what you're getting matched for, we need to have a conversation about where you could put the rest. It's a great conversation to have. So you've got some preservation tools like life insurance for tax-free stuff in the future, right? And that's income tax-free. Or you could look at other Roth provisions too, and we can discuss that and see what's available to you.
Well, they keep tinkering with our retirement stuff. And, that's the one thing that seems to be constant here is change. I mean, Mark, 70 and a half used to be RMD age. Then it's 73. Pretty soon it'll be 75. They got rid of some Social Security rules. I saw today, this week, that they're considering moving the retirement age up in order to try to help Social Security in the future. So what if it did go from 62 to 64? What if the full retirement age went from 66, 67 to 69? You need to know this stuff. You need to know, and it could affect your retirement plans. So let's get a look at where you are right now. No obligation, no cost look. Give Mark a call. Let's talk about your retirement. 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. Use the website too, moretoretire.com. Just spell it right out, moretoretire.com. Down at the bottom of the page is a place for you to put some information, and Mark and the team will reach out. All right, so how and when do we access our money in that 401k? For many of us, this will be our biggest retirement resource. For our parents, they would sell their house. That would fund their retirement, and they'd move to a smaller house. That's what they did. Our biggest asset will probably be the 401k. So, Mark, there's so many things you can do. Do you retire and start pulling money out as you need it? Do you push off Social Security to 70 and live on the 401k? Do you flip it around? Take Social Security first, leave the 401k for later? Or do you just sit and wait until the government tells you you have to start taking this money? There's lots of options. Talk me through these things. How do we figure out what's right for us?
Sure. So obviously, if you've been contributing to a 401k heavily and that's your main asset, I think just having a conversation with me would be beneficial for you. Just simply put, because you can get an idea of what you should and shouldn't do, right? And we want to make sure that you're making good decisions for your financial future. You don't have to promise me anything. I would just like to have a conversation with you because I think it would be beneficial. So pulling money out of a 401k, the first thing I'm going to say is this. If you're separated from service before 59 and a half, meaning you were let go or you quit your job or you just retired early or you're 59 and a half years old, we should have a conversation about your 401k. I had a person ask me a loaded question the other day. Should I roll my 401k? And I said, okay, well, I'm not going to answer you directly, but I'd just say, if it was my 401k and I was separated from service, I'm 48 years old, I'm separated from service because it's an old 401k. Am I going to roll it to an IRA? Yeah, I'm definitely rolling mine to an IRA. The reason why I'm going to roll it to an IRA is because I know that I can open myself up to the rest of the investments out there as opposed to what's limited into the plan. So simply put, I wouldn't be taking withdrawals from a 401k. I'd be rolling my own to an IRA, and that's because I want to open myself up to the world of other investments and opportunities. And then the question is, planning. So I met a person recently, and they got laid off. They had worked. They're 55 years old. They had worked for the same organization since they were 27, so they were there for 28 years.
Wow!
And just got laid off.
Ouch.
So they came to me. They've got some money in a 401k. They had a very small loan against a 401k, and they have an accountant, not a CPA, and that can make a difference because the accountant's telling them, okay, well, when you pay off this loan or if you take a withdrawal, make sure they code it as a hardship. Well, the 401k custodial plan, they're not going to code that as a hardship in this particular case because the person was already let go. So because of that, they're going to have to code it on the other side with the CPA as opposed to an accountant who might not have the ability to do that. CPAs might have the ability to do a little bit more than the accountant in this situation. So in this particular scenario, they're going to have to take, if they roll to the IRA, they're going to have to take the penalty that the IRS is imposing, but they can make it back potentially on the other end if the CPA can code it correctly with the IRS. So just understanding these different things, it's really important as you address this. But when the person does decide to do something like this, they have to address these things. And we have these conversations about, well, if you do roll that 401k over to an IRA, do we want to make some provisions? Because if you get another job, how much longer are you going to work? You're going to work for another 10 years. Well, if you do, should we look at some of this as a provision for an annuity with some kind of income rider? Because you don't seem to have any pension in your future. You only have your Social Security, and this is everything you've saved your whole life for. So these are all the conversations that come up. And so addressing these things, pull from IRAs, pull from Roth IRAs, but 401k, I'm always going to look at, if it's my money, I'm always going to look at rolling it to an IRA.
A lot of people have different opinions on this, and some will say work as long as you can, save as much as you can, and push your Social Security off as long as you can. I've heard that many times. But at the same time, you can pass on your 401k and your IRAs. You can't pass on your Social Security as a legacy. So some people will say, no, take your Social Security first, get that money, push your 401k and your IRA off till later, because that will grow and that will be your legacy. So, Mark, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And I guess it all comes down to, I hate to say it depends, but in many cases, it's just not the same for everybody, is it?
It's not. And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons why some people don't draw Social Security early is because they're still working full time.
Right.
And we know that there's a penalty there. So if you're going to work full time, then you might want to wait until 67 to turn it on. I get it. But if you are retired at 60 years old and you want to turn on Social Security at your age of 62, I say fire away, because you know why? I mean, like I said, what if you die at 63 or 64? At least you got something out of it. Your assets, that's a different ballgame. Let's grow those things, right? We talk about it, preservation, income, and growth. We can still grow your assets. And you don't have to always think like, oh, I need to set it and forget it. No, you can still pull from those assets, but let's talk about doing that later if we could pull from the Social Security. You're
listening to the Mark Osler Retirement Experience. The reason we have this show is you get to a point where you say, who's going to help me with my retirement planning? And you look for that person, and you wonder what you ask that person. How do I start that conversation? Well, let's just take all of that pressure off. Give Mark a call, set up a date on the calendar. There's no cost or obligation. Let's put the papers out on the table and say, okay, this is what I've done to save here, 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 and here. This is what my monthly costs are here, here, and here. Can we put these things together? And this is what I want to do in retirement. Okay, let's put it all together, get it all out on the table, and do your retirement math. Let's get it done. MoreToRetire.com is the website. And at the bottom of the page, there's a place for you to put some information in there. That'll give us a clue what you're interested in talking about. Team will reach out to you, or you call right now. It's 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. We'll take a break. When we come back, there's a long-tested, hard and fast financial rule that people have been using for retirement for many years. The people at Barron's said, okay, let's put that one to the test. And they gave us a really volatile year in the stock market to see if it would work. We'll look at that one and more coming up next on the Mark Osler Retirement Experience.
A simple piece of paper. It's something we use every day. For the most part, it does what it's designed to do. It sits there flat on your desk as a placeholder for information. But with a couple strategic folds, suddenly your flat piece of paper becomes an airplane and flies across the room. Your 401k is kind of like that flat piece of paper. It just sits there as a placeholder for your money. Mark Osler can show you those strategic moves to take your 401k from just sitting there to creating the income you need for retirement. Call today for a free no-obligation meeting. 984-300-1984. That's 984-300-1984. Or online at moretoretire.com.
Welcome back to the Mark Osler Retirement Experience. Online, moretoretire.com. If it's time to talk about your retirement, let's really start to make some moves here. Let's actually get something down on paper and talk to you about your retirement in a real serious way and get some facts and figures for you. moretoretire.com is the website, or 984-300-1984. Well, when you think about what a financial advisor does for you, what do you think it is? Are you saying, well, he's going to show me the next NVIDIA. He's going to show me the next Microsoft. He's going to show me the next Google. And I'm going to invest there and I'll be on easy street. Well, that could happen, but probably not. I mean, I see you, Mark, in the picture here, and you're not wearing that Johnny Carson Swami hat that he used to wear all the time. And I don't expect you to have that crystal ball. But you know what? Nobody does. And this is kind of interesting. We talk about these big names out there like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and all these people that just manage billions of dollars. One of them is a company called Bridgewater. And the CEO at Bridgewater said this recently about picking investments. He said, I've got 400 people working day and night, and they still get it wrong, like 40% of the time. Maybe they get it wrong a lot more than that. I don't know. But it seems as though stock picking is kind of like a guessing game. It's like throw a dart and I hope. It used to be that way, I guess. So how do you take some of the guessing out of this, Mark? Because it seems like there is that factor is involved in the whole idea of playing in the market.
I'm glad you brought this up. Folks, if you're just having trouble identifying whether you like your portfolio or not, this is where we start. So let's just say, for example, you got a 401k or you got a brokerage statement in general, whatever it might be directly in the market. What I tell folks is, go to my website, moretoretire.com. It's not the number 2, it's the TO. Like I need more to retire, moretoretire.com. Now, if you want to hear from me, you just scroll down to the bottom of the home screen and you can enter in your data there and just hit submit, and I'll get that in my email box and my assistant will reach out to you. But you can also go a step further, and on the home page at the top upper right-hand corner, we have a upload button. It's a secure upload, and you hit that secure upload button, you can upload any statements you want there. And what we do is we take that statement and then we run a report. We run the report because we want to identify certain factors. So the other day I ran a report, and on the report I recognized that a person was okay with their portfolio, but they weren't sure exactly where they were going with it because, they had reached a certain age where they felt like maybe they were taking more risk than they needed to. Mm-hmm. And we were identifying this portfolio as a 60-40 portfolio, but when I look at the 60-40 portfolio, the risk did seem a little high for it. Why? How do I identify this? Well, let's look at it. The 60-40 portfolio had a standard deviation of around a 10, okay? To give you an idea of what the S&P standard deviation is, it's right around a 15. Randy likes to call this the wobble effect. The wobble
effect, yes. How much does it go back and forth, up and down? Yeah.
So this is a really easy way for me to identify what your level of risk is. Well, if you're in a 60-40 portfolio with a standard deviation of a 10 and the S&P is a 15, that just means you're taking on very similar risks to the S&P 500, but with fixed portfolio built in, it seems like you might be taking more risk than a standard 60-40 portfolio.
Okay.
So these are the types of things we look at, and we want to identify this because you could actually do the reverse. You could actually find a place where you could potentially have a higher standard deviation and a lower beta, and it's very possible. And these are the things we want to identify, answer, and help, and maybe just talk about it and just have a conversation, because what if you are taking more risk than you want to?
It's a great point, and I think that the idea of working in the stock market doesn't mean that it has to be at really, really high risk. I mean, we hear of things like hedge funds, and we hear of things like Bitcoin, and we hear of things like IPOs, and they just sound risky. And, there is some high risk involved in some of the market decisions you can make. But, Mark, there's also places within the market that you can go to that has lower risk. I mean, I don't want to name any companies, but, utilities and things like that. And they don't have that high risk that some of the other stocks that we talk about might have. And maybe that is appealing to people if they want to have one toe in the market.
Yeah, I mean, if you're stock picking, those individual stocks have very high standard deviations. Well, that just tells you that's a huge wobble, right? The higher standard deviation, the bigger the wobble effect, meaning, big growth, but also potential big losses at the same time. And I had some clients of mine, they had a bunch of annuities, and they came to me because they just wanted me to manage their portfolio because they just had a bunch of stocks and they made some money, but they just wanted me to manage it. Why? Because they hit this point where they realize, okay, we don't want a stock pick anymore. And I get that.
Yeah.
We don't have to do that. But if you want me to help you look at some stocks, I'd be glad to do that and add some personal effects in there and to have a discussion about it because it's important. But Randy, when you get to 60 years old, you just don't view the growth as important maybe as the preservation. It changes a little bit. You're like, you know what? I've made enough money here, and maybe I want to put on some preservation tactics. And that's when folks start to look at things like fixed index annuities, income riders, maybe death benefit riders, those types of things. But you can also have market money too. And it's actually good to have market money. I met some folks where things didn't seem right. They had too much money in annuities. And I said, we should probably look at maybe some market moves here. And maybe you could afford a little bit of a risk out there, some exposure if you have some time on your side, right? And that's an important conversation to have. So everybody's situation is different, Randy, but where we start is a report. So we want to identify in the report these risk factors based on beta and standard deviation, but there's a whole lot more to it as well. We want to identify correlation, which is things moving in the same direction. We want to identify the scatter plot, which is the 4 quadrants of low risk, low return, low risk, high return. There's never one in there. There's high risk and high return, and high risk and low return. We want to avoid the high risk, low returns, right? And these are all the conversations we're going to have and these discussions because we want to identify how can we help you with preservation, income, and growth in your future.
We've talked about you and your money kind of on a pyramid. And if you think of a pyramid in your head, and the very top of that pyramid in your working years is growth. And then the middle section might be preservation. And then the bottom section is income because you don't need income during your working years. In your retirement, that pyramid flips. And now income is at the top of the list. Preservation probably staying in that second slot, and then growth down at the bottom. And so as you go through your retirement years and your needs change, that means your planning has to change. So give Mark a call. Let's talk through it. Give us a look on the website, moretoretire.com, moretoretire.com, or 984-300-1984. Pretty simple. 984-300-1984. Meeting with Mark, no cost, no obligation. Let's talk about your retirement. All right, I mentioned this hard and fast retirement rule. Mark mentioned the 60-40 portfolio. That one's been out there for an awfully long time. There's another one called the 4% rule, and that one's been around since the 90s. And when you think about the stock market in the 90s, it was going pretty good. For about 10, 15, 20 years, it went up like 1,000%. It was pretty crazy. And so during that period of time, the 4% rule came up, which basically said if the stock market's going up like it usually does, 7%, 8% a year, you should be able to take 4% out of your savings and never run out of money because the growth will replace what you took out. Well, the people at Barron's said, let's just maybe test that. We're going to find a year that was really volatile in the stock market, and we'll put that 4% rule in there. They picked 1969 for some reason. That's a long time back there, but yes, that's the year they picked. If you retired at the end of 1969, your money would have lasted 35 years. So the 4% rule worked. But if you retired at the beginning of 1969, your money lasted 26 years. So there, maybe not. That's a pretty significant difference. So, Mark, we cannot control what the stock market is going to do when we retire. So how do we take the when out of this and put the how into it? Because it's not so much when you retire, we can't control that. But we can control how we place our money. So talk to me a little bit about people who go into a down market in their retirement and what kind of risk that is to their retirement, and how can we get around that?
There's a lot of folks out there that probably can answer that question if they retired anywhere from 07 to 09 when the 401ks, they were joking, became 201ks, right?
Yeah.
I love to bring this up at when I do presentations. 1980, the year 2000, okay? Mm-hmm. I show the graph, and it shows some bullish years, a little bit of pullback in the market, but it's bullish. You know, it looks fantastic, incredible moving average, right? But then you take S&P 500 from 2000 till now, and what you do is you see the two recessions that were built in between 2000 to 2002 and 2007 to 2009. When we went through the recession 2000 to 2002, the S&P 500 dropped 49%. It came back, but then as soon as it came back, we had another recession from 07 to 09, and it pulled back this time 56.5%. And that had a big effect on folks as well, and it can affect your bottom line. So when you bring up sequence of returns or sequence of numbers, I like to show this to folks at presentations as well, because this is an example. You can take returns in given years. Let's say you have plus 10%, then you have minus 4%, plus 20%, minus 6%. So let's just say you go down a list and you list 10 years of returns of pluses and minuses. You probably have 7 pluses and 3 minuses, or 8 and 2, okay? And then you take those numbers and you jumble them up on the other side in different years. You just change the years that they happen in.
Okay.
If you take no withdrawals, the figures are exactly the same, the returns. However, if you take returns and you jumble those figures up in different years, it actually can come out vastly different. And so that's what we're talking about here is how much risk are you willing to take in retirement when maybe necessarily you don't have to, because when we look at it, we want to say, what if you're taking these withdrawals? If you take a withdrawal in a big loss year at the same time, they joke about it. They call it a double whammy, and it's a real thing. Folks feel that on the bottom line, because if you're pulling off, let's just say, you're taking 4% of 100% of your money, that's 4%, right? But if you're taking, 4% of a 20% down year loss, that's 4% of 80% of your money. Now you're taking out 5%. That's going to have a pretty big effect on the bottom line, right? And these are the conversations that need to be had.
Digging your way out of a hole at the beginning of your retirement is not the place that you want to be. I mean, you could take two guys, Dan and Stan, and one went into retirement in 1990 when the market was roaring, and the other guy, retired in 2000. And pretty soon there was a big market pullback, and then a second big market pullback. Which person, if they retired with exactly the same amount of money, comes out better? And the person who retired when the market was going up in the early part of their retirement probably did much better. So the idea of losing money in the market while you're in retirement is a real conversation that you should have. And Mark could sit down and talk to you about that wobble in the market and how much wobble you want to deal with. And if you don't want to deal with any of it, that's okay too. Let's sit down together and go through your retirement wishes and how you feel about this whole business of risk in the stock market. Here's the number on the website, moretoretire.com. You'll see at the bottom of the page a place for you to put some information in there. Mark and the team will reach out to you. Or call 984-300-1984. Let's get the conversation going. 984-300-1984. Well, so far our economy has avoided a recession. But according to this new study from Allianz, we have a retirement confidence recession. They had a study, and they do these studies every single year. And here's what they found. 47% of people going into retirement don't have a written financial plan. 53% of people believe, I've got a 401k, that should be enough. 45% of people say they have no idea how to turn their savings or that 401k into an income check. And 59% say they have no idea of how to prepare for retirement. So this is pretty much half the population out there who's going into retirement, Mark, that they don't know what their next move is. I mean, we can say, call us. That's pretty simple to say. But I think we talk about preservation and income and growth. If you can get those things knocked down right away, I think you'd be in a better footing as you go into retirement, don't you?
Absolutely, Randy. Let's just discuss it. I grew up on the hardwood or in the backyard or over on the blacktop with friends, and we'd play horse. But sometimes when we wanted to be done with it fast, we'd play pig. And that's our motto here is preservation, income, and growth. These are really important things, and all of these other underlying factors come into play. What comes into play, Randy? Taxes, inflation, and bottom line income Have we built in an income plan for our future? Social Security, can we rely on Social Security? We know that if nothing changes, if they don't correct the Social Security system, we know that it could potentially reduce everybody's payments in the future by potentially 20%. I like to take that into account because I want to make sure that if we're looking at something for you, we could be certain about what we're looking at. So let's just say you picked an income rider with an annuity. You can pick the ones that have projections, but I certainly would like to pick one that would have that one that says this one is guaranteed for life at this certain amount of money. And I would say if you're going to pick an income rider, that's probably the smart one because then you're building in something you feel like you can rely on. Now, have you done that yet? Have you looked at that? Because if you have 10 years left before retirement, or if you have 5 years left before retirement, or if you're retiring next year, the more time you give me, the more we can do to look at planning provisions for you and answer these questions about preservation, income, and growth. Have you reached that stage in life where you need to preserve a little bit more as opposed to taking as much risk as you've been taking? Do we have the income provisions in place for retirement 5 years in advance? Well, let's discuss that. Let's discuss what you have done and see if you could do it a little bit better. And then growth. What kind of growth do we want now? And what kind of growth do we want in retirement? And what kind of provisions are we going to make there as well? And do we dial back on the risk factors? Do we dial back on that beta that I mentioned earlier? Or do we dial back by just taking some money out of the market, maybe looking at some banking provisions there too?
You know, the questions that we have about retirement are pretty simple, but sometimes the answers are kind of hard to figure out. And a lot of people, as they sit down with someone like Mark, might not even know what to ask. And I always say, start with those same questions that you ask when you go into a job interview. How am I going to get paid? How much am I going to get paid? And how does this 401k that I've been saving in for the last 25, 30 years, how does it become a paycheck? Am I headed for a tax problem? What do I do about Social Security? My mom is in memory care. I'm scared that might happen to me. What can I do about that? Those are really, really important and deep questions. And it's the stuff that you got to get out on the table. And so if you're seeing all your friends retire or you're coming up on that date, you turn 65 and all of a sudden you got to sign up for Medicare and you go, well, the next thing's retirement. I got to talk to somebody about that. That's why we have this show. Give Mark a call. Let's talk through your questions and your concerns. How do you get paid in retirement? Let's find out. Let's get the answers for you. MoreToRetire.com is the website. MoreToRetire.com. Bottom of the page, a place for you to put some information in there. The team will reach out to you. Get a date on a calendar. Let's talk through it. 984-300-1984 is the number. 984-300-1984. No cost, no obligation. This is an opportunity to meet Mark, get your questions out on the table, see if it meshes, see if you are a good fit with Mark, and we'll go from there. We thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great weekend, and we will be here next week. We hope you will be too on the Mark Osler Retirement Experience.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Mark Osler Retirement Experience. Mark Osler Retirement Experience is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Mark Osler Retirement Experience are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risks, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This radio podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be considered as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Mark Osler Retirement Experience is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute legal or tax advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein are provided by third parties that have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mark Osler Retirement Experience. Market Guard is a firm that provides investment signals as well as portfolio allocation recommendations for a wide variety of model portfolios. Market Guard does not offer advice or enter into fiduciary relationships. Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.